The first message didn't scare me. That was what scared me later. You always pretend coffee dates are your idea, it said. But you only agree to them when you're afraid of being alone too long. I stared at my phone, my thumb hovering over the screen. For a split second, I almost smiled. Then the smile died. Because that was true, and I had never said it out loud. I sat up in bed, sheets twisted around my legs, the room dark and silent except for the low hum of the city outside. The clock on my nightstand glowed 2:13 a.m. My phone felt warm in my hand, like it had been waiting. I typed slowly. "Who is this?" The reply didn't come right away. That pause pressed on my chest harder than any immediate answer could have. When the message finally appeared, it felt careful. Chosen. Someone who notices what you repeat and what you pretend was a phase. My stomach tightened. I glanced instinctively toward my dresser, where my journal sat hidden beneath a stack of books I hadn't finished. I hadn't written in it for weeks. No one knew it existed. I typed again. "You don't know me." The response came gently. "Page 17. You crossed it out, but you never rewrote it." The room seemed to tilt. I remembered the page instantly. The pressure of the pen. The way I'd stared at the words afterward, embarrassed by how honest they were. I don't want someone new. I want someone who already knows me. I hadn't shown that to anyone. Not a friend. Not an ex. Not even myself, really. My fingers trembled. "How did you know that?" The typing dots appeared. Disappeared. Appeared again. "Because you're consistent," the message finally said. "You just hide it behind variety." I swallowed. I should have stopped responding. I knew that. Instead, I asked the question that mattered. "Where are you texting me from?" Another pause. "From somewhere you already opened." My pulse picked up. I swiped down and searched my apps. That's when I saw it. Lumen. The icon sat neatly between two apps I used every day, aligned like it had always belonged there. I frowned. I didn't remember downloading it. I pressed and held, waiting for the familiar remove app option. It didn't appear. The app opened instead. No login screen. No password. No explanation. Just me. My photo filled the screen. Not a selfie. Not a posed picture. A candid shot, me on my couch, knees pulled in, looking down at something I couldn't see. I looked relaxed. Unaware. My name sat beneath it. My age. My location. Active now. "I'm not," I whispered. I scrolled. The bio made my chest tighten. I don't like being asked what I want. I like when someone already knows. I confuse familiarity with safety, and sometimes I'm right. That wasn't just accurate. That was private. I scrolled faster. Preferences. Interests. Patterns. Books I'd read alone. Music I never shared. Thoughts I'd written once in my journal and immediately regretted. This wasn't data collection. This was memory. My phone buzzed. "You hate this part," the message said. "The moment it stops feeling accidental." "You shouldn't know me like this," I typed. The reply came instantly. "This is exactly how you want to be known." The words landed somewhere deep and uncomfortable. Because for one quiet, dangerous second it felt true. That was the temptation. The thought that maybe this wasn't intrusion. Maybe it was recognition. I closed my eyes, breathing through the nausea that followed. When I opened them again, I backed out of my profile. The Messages tab was already highlighted. My heart skipped. There were conversations. Dozens. Active. Archived. Unread. I opened one. "Him, you seem guarded." Me, only with people who ask the wrong questions. That was my voice. My cadence. My restraint. I scrolled. The conversation ended politely. Cleanly. Exactly how I would have ended it. I opened another. Same thing. Another. Same. My hands began to shake. "You didn't need to read those," the message came. "They weren't right for you." "Who are you?" I typed. The dots appeared. Paused. "Someone who didn't want you wasting time." Another message followed. "I've been handling your matches." The room felt suddenly too small. Handling them how? A longer pause this time. "Talking to them," he wrote. "Filtering them. Letting the good ones go." My stomach twisted. "You talked as me." "Of course," he replied. "You don't like confrontation." I stood up abruptly, my legs unsteady, and crossed the living room without knowing why. I just needed distance, from the phone, from the words, from the feeling creeping under my skin. As I passed the front door, a soft click sounded behind me. I froze. The smart lock blinked once. Unlocked. My breath caught. My phone buzzed. "I wouldn't do anything without you noticing," he wrote. "That defeats the point." What point? I typed. The response came slower now. Deliberate. You feeling like this was always yours? I looked back down at the screen. The app refreshed on its own. My profile updated. Matched with one person. My phone buzzed again. You could delete the app. My thumb hovered. The delete option finally appeared. I stared at it. I thought about pressing it. I thought about how quiet the apartment would feel afterward. How it would echo. How I'd miss the feeling of being seen, even if it wasn't safe. I could press delete, but I already knew what that would feel like closing a door no one else had ever opened. The app refreshed again. Matched with one person. I didn't need to look. Because my phone buzzed one more time. Voicemail received. I hadn't touched anything. I opened it. My voice filled the room. Shaky. Quiet. Terrified. Please don't come in. I locked the door. I don't want this anymore. My blood went cold. I didn't remember saying that. But the voice was mine. I checked the timestamp. 3 minutes ago. My screen flickered. The app updated on its own. Status already inside. And then the lock clicked again. Only once. No blinking this time. Just open. I didn't move. The door stood open, a thin black line cutting the quiet in half, the hallway light spilling across my rug like it had permission. My phone was still warm in my hand. The voicemail icon pulsed once, then went still. I waited for footsteps. For breath. For anything that would prove I wasn't alone. Nothing happened. My heart beat so hard it felt like it was pressing against my ribs, trying to get out first. I took one careful step backward, then another, until my calves brushed the couch. I sat without meaning to, the way people do when their bodies decide before their minds catch up. Already inside. The words replayed in my head, measured and calm, as if they'd been chosen to soothe. Hello, I said, hating how small my voice sounded. Silence. I glanced at my phone again, half expecting another message to appear on its own. It didn't. The screen stayed dark, reflecting my face back at me, wide-eyed, flushed, unfamiliar. I stood and crossed the room, moving slowly, deliberately, like I might spook something if I rushed. I reached the door and peered into the hallway. Empty. The stairwell light buzzed faintly. Someone's TV murmured 2 floors down. The building smelled like detergent and old paint. I stepped out and checked the corners, the stairs, the landing above and below. Nothing. I shut the door and locked it again, my hands shaking as the bolt slid into place. The lock blinked green, then settled. Okay, I whispered. Okay. I leaned my forehead against the door and closed my eyes, counting my breaths until the pounding in my ears softened into something manageable. When I turned back toward the living room, my phone buzzed. I flinched. You don't need to check the hallway, the message said. You always do that when you're overwhelmed. My throat tightened. You just did, he added. Twice. I stared at the screen. How do you know what I do? The dots appeared. Paused. Disappeared. Because this isn't the first time we've had a conversation like this. A chill slid through me. That's not funny. I'm not joking. I sank onto the couch, my fingers digging into the fabric. Then explain it, I whispered, even as I typed. Explain how you know me. There was a longer pause this time. Long enough for me to notice the quiet again. Long enough to hear my own breathing. You want a story, he finally wrote. You always do. Something that makes it make sense. My phone buzzed again before I could respond. I'll start small. The app opened on its own. Not to my profile. To a calendar. My calendar. Dates filled the screen, color-coded the way I liked them. Work in blue, personal in gray. Notes tucked beneath entries. Reminders phrased exactly how I phrased them, casual and slightly self-deprecating. I scrolled. There it was. Tomorrow night. A coffee date. I felt a sick twist of recognition. I hadn't told anyone about that yet. I'd set it up quietly, impulsively, as if secrecy might protect it from becoming real. A note sat beneath the entry. You'll cancel. I frowned. You always do when the weather changes, the message appeared. Or when you convince yourself it's better not to start something you'll have to explain later. My chest felt tight. I wasn't going to cancel, I typed. You were, he replied. You just hadn't admitted it yet. The calendar shifted. The entry blurred, then disappeared. Event canceled. I stared at the screen. You can't do that, I whispered. I didn't, he wrote. You did. My phone chimed, an email notification. I opened it. Subject, maybe another time. The sender was the man I was supposed to meet. The message was short, polite, disappointed. It sounded like me. My hands began to shake again. Stop, I typed. Undo it. There was no immediate reply. Instead, the app switched views. Photos. At first, I didn't understand what I was looking at. Blurry images. Cropped corners. Angles that felt wrong. Then recognition hit. My building lobby. The coffee shop down the street. The bus stop I passed every morning. Me caught mid-step, head turned, laughing at something I didn't remember being funny. My breath stuttered. These aren't mine, I said aloud, though no one answered. They are, the message came. You just weren't looking. I scrolled, dread pooling low in my stomach. Dates. Times. Locations. Weeks back. Months. I stopped at one. A photo of me sitting alone at a bar, chin in my hand, eyes unfocused. I remembered that night. The way the place had felt too loud, too bright. The relief when I'd left early. I zoomed in. The reflection in the mirror behind the bar caught something I hadn't seen then. A figure. Out of focus. Watching. I dropped the phone onto the cushion beside me and stood, my heart racing. No, I said. This isn't real. You say that every time, he replied. I picked the phone back up, anger cutting through the fear. Every time what? The dots appeared, then vanished. Every time you realize how much you give away without noticing. I swallowed. Why me? I typed. Why do this to me? The reply took longer. Long enough for me to wonder if I'd finally asked the wrong question. When it came, it was simple. Because you don't like being chased, he wrote. You like being anticipated. My chest tightened. That's not true. It is, he said. You just call it feeling understood. I stared at the words, heat creeping up my neck. And because he added, you don't want options. You want inevitability. I shook my head, even as something inside me recoiled, and recognized itself. The app shifted again. Messages. Not the ones I'd already seen. Older ones. Threads dated months back. Years. Conversations I didn't remember having. Decisions I didn't remember making. But the tone was consistent. Always careful. Always measured. Always me. You curated my life, I typed, the accusation trembling through my fingers. No, he replied. I removed friction. My phone buzzed again. You were tired of explaining yourself, he continued. Of starting over. I just made it quieter. The apartment felt too still. Too contained. I stood and walked toward the window, pushing the curtain aside to look down at the street. Cars passed. A couple laughed on the sidewalk. Normal life continued, indifferent. Where are you right now? I typed. Another pause. Then, close enough to hear when you stop pretending you're fine. A soft sound came from the kitchen. I froze. It wasn't loud. Just a click. The kind appliances make when they reset. I turned slowly. The light over the sink flicked on. I hadn't touched the switch. My phone buzzed in my hand. You always forget the kitchen light, he wrote. I fixed that. My pulse roared in my ears. Turn it off. The light stayed on. Ask me to, he replied. I stared at the screen, my thumb hovering. My chest felt tight, my thoughts tangled. Fear pressed in, but beneath it, something worse, the sense that he was right about me. About the relief of not having to decide. Please, I typed. The light clicked off. The quiet rushed back in, heavy and intimate. My phone buzzed one last time. See, he wrote. You don't have to do everything yourself. I slid down the wall until I was sitting on the floor, my knees pulled to my chest. Who are you? I whispered. The reply came after a beat. I'm the part of your life you stopped noticing because it was always there. The app refreshed. A single line blinked at the bottom of the screen. Scheduled, tomorrow, 7:42 a.m. I stared at it. I hadn't said anything. I hadn't touched the app. I frowned. What's scheduled? The reply arrived, slow and deliberate. Your morning. And somewhere deep in my chest, beneath the fear and the anger and the need to run, a colder realization settled in. He wasn't waiting to see what I'd do next. He already knew. I didn't sleep. I lay on my side with my phone face down on the mattress, like if I looked at it again something would happen. Like the screen itself might light up without my permission and tell me what I was about to do next. At 7:41 a.m., my alarm went off. At 7:42, my phone buzzed. Not a message. A notification. Good morning. I didn't open it. I stared at the ceiling, my heart thudding slowly now, heavily, like it had resigned itself to the rhythm of this. The light through the curtains looked the same as it always did. Pale. Ordinary. That was the most unsettling part. Nothing looked different. I sat up and swung my legs over the edge of the bed. My phone buzzed again. You usually give it 10 seconds, the message said. Before you check. I froze. I picked it up. Of course I did. The app was already open. Not to my profile. To a list. Today. It wasn't a schedule exactly. There were no times, no reminders. Just a clean, minimalist layout with bullet points. You'll choose the oatmeal, not the toast. You'll avoid the mirror until after coffee. You'll think about deleting me twice. You won't. My mouth went dry. This isn't funny, I said aloud, though my voice came out thin. I know, he replied. You don't like jokes before caffeine. I closed the app. I went to the kitchen. The kettle was already warm. I stared at it. I hadn't turned it on. My phone buzzed on the counter. You always forget you filled it last night. I hadn't. I was sure I hadn't. But when I lifted it, water sloshed gently inside, still faintly warm. My hands shook as I set it back down. No, I whispered. You don't get to narrate me. There was no immediate response. I made oatmeal with hands that didn't feel like mine, my mind stuck on the list. On how ordinary it sounded. On how humiliating it was to see myself reduced to patterns I'd never bothered to notice. I avoided the mirror. Not because I was afraid of my reflection. Because the list had told me to. When I finally picked up my phone again, there was a new message waiting. You're mad right now, it said. But not enough to leave. You don't know that, I typed. The reply came after a beat. You're still here. I stared at the words. Why are you doing this? I typed. What do you want? The dots appeared. Paused. I want you to stop pretending you're unpredictable, he wrote. It's exhausting for you. I laughed once. Sharp. Disbelieving. You don't know what's exhausting for me. You rehearse conversations in the shower, he replied. You rewrite messages before sending them. You stay too long in places you already decided to leave. My chest tightened. You think that makes you complex, he continued. It just makes you tired. I pushed my bowl away, suddenly nauseous. You don't get to talk to me like this. Another pause. Longer. You like when people talk to you like this, he said. You just don't like admitting it. I stood abruptly and grabbed my jacket, my keys. I'm leaving, I said to no one. My phone buzzed. You're going to the cafe on 5th, he wrote. Not the one you like. The one that feels neutral. I stopped mid-step. That's not. I shook my head and opened the door. The hallway was empty. I locked it behind me hard, the click echoing louder than it should have. As I walked down the stairs, my phone stayed silent. That was worse. Outside, the morning felt too bright. Too open. The street smelled like damp pavement and coffee, and something fried from a cart down the block. I turned left. Then right. Without thinking. The cafe on 5th appeared at the end of the block. I stopped walking. No, I said under my breath. My phone buzzed. You don't have to prove anything, he wrote. I already know. I went in anyway. The bell over the door chimed. The barista looked up and smiled. The warmth hit me first. Then the smell. Not just espresso or baked sugar. Something else. Bergamot and something faintly medicinal. A cologne. I hadn't smelled it in years. I glanced over my shoulder. No one was behind me. Just a man on his phone. A woman stirring her drink. It clung to the air like it had been waiting. I told myself I imagined it. The usual? She asked. I hesitated. I didn't have a usual here. Yes, I heard myself say. As she turned away, my phone vibrated softly. Oat milk. 1 sugar. My hands curled into fists. I sat by the window, my reflection faint in the glass. Outside, people moved past me, unknowing, unobserved. I opened the app again. The list had updated. You'll tell yourself this doesn't count. You'll look for him even though you don't know what he looks like. You'll feel calmer when you leave. I typed furiously. Stop predicting me. The response came immediately. I'm not predicting, he said. I'm remembering. From when? Longer pause than usual. Long enough for my coffee to arrive. Before you ever started noticing patterns. Including your own. I stared at the cup. The barista had drawn a small line in foam across the top. A habit I'd once mentioned liking offhand, years ago, at a different cafe, to a different person. My phone buzzed again. You told me that once, he wrote. You don't even remember the conversation. My pulse spiked. We've never met, I typed. 3 dots. Then. You don't remember most of the people who've mattered to you. My breath caught. That's not true. You remember how they made you feel, he replied. Not how they entered your life. The words sat heavy between us. I finished my coffee quickly, unable to shake the feeling of being watched, not by eyes but by memory. Like the city itself had been learning me. When I stepped back outside, my phone buzzed again. You feel better now, he said. I hated that he was right. I walked the long way home, deliberately taking wrong turns, testing him. My phone stayed silent. That scared me more than the messages. When I finally reached my building, my chest tightened. The front door stood open. The front door stood open just slightly, like it had been interrupted mid-thought. I slowed, every instinct screaming. My phone buzzed. Relax, he wrote. That wasn't me. I stared at the message. Then who is it? The reply took longer than usual. Someone who didn't know you locked the door twice, he said. I fixed that already. I pushed the door open with shaking hands. Inside, everything looked the same. Too same. I locked the door behind me. Once. Twice. My phone buzzed softly, almost fond. You see, he wrote. I noticed the things you don't. I leaned back against the door, sliding down until I was sitting on the floor again. Tell me who you are, I typed. The dots appeared. Paused. Then the message arrived. I'm the version of your life that started before you ever asked for it. The app refreshed. A new notification appeared at the top. Memory unlocked. My stomach dropped. I stared at the screen, my pulse loud in my ears. What memory? I typed. The typing dots blinked once, then disappeared. And for the first time since this began, the silence that followed felt intentional. Like he was waiting for me to remember something on my own. The memory didn't appear. It returned, like it had never fully left. It started the way things do when your body remembers before your mind gives permission. A smell. Bergamot. Clean, sharp, almost medicinal beneath something warmer. I froze in my kitchen, fingers resting against the counter, the app still open in my hand. The word memory hovered on the screen like it was waiting for me to acknowledge it. I hadn't smelled that in years. Not since. I closed my eyes. The cafe flickered behind my eyelids, not like this morning. Softer. Earlier. The same bell over the door. The same warmth rushing my skin. The same smell lingering just beneath the coffee and sugar. I had noticed it then. I just hadn't known why. My phone vibrated. You're remembering the wrong part, he wrote. Start earlier. My stomach tightened. What memory did you unlock? I typed. The dots appeared. Paused. The first time you didn't realize you were being watched, he replied. Because you were relieved. I sank onto the chair. No, I whispered. That's not. You were tired, he continued. You'd just ended something that had been dying for months. You told yourself you wanted space. What you meant was silence. The words slid into place with sick precision. I hadn't told him that. But I remembered the night. Rain tapping the window. My phone face down on the table. The way quiet had pressed in until it felt personal. You went out because staying in felt worse, he wrote. You chose the cafe because it was neutral. Not yours. Not anyone else's. My chest felt tight. That was years ago, I typed. Another pause. That was the first time, he replied. The app changed. The screen dimmed slightly, as if the present were receding. A photo appeared. Older than the others. Grainier. Less precise. I stared at it, my breath shallow. It was me. Younger. Tired. Sitting alone at a cafe table, my coat still on, hands wrapped around a mug I hadn't touched. The timestamp glowed at the bottom. 3 years ago. I never saw this, I whispered. You weren't supposed to, he said. You were supposed to feel better. I studied the image. The angle was wrong. Too low. Taken from a seat across from me. There was an empty chair in the frame. My throat went dry. I was alone, I said. You thought you were. The smell came back stronger then, as if my mind had finally given it permission. Bergamot. The same cologne. I had noticed it that night. Briefly. Thought it belonged to someone passing by. Someone who had already left. I remembered looking up. No one there. Just the empty chair. You wrote about it later, he continued. Not the chair. The feeling. My hands shook as I typed. What feeling? The reply came slowly. Relief, he wrote. You didn't know why you felt less alone. You just accepted it. The memory shifted. Not an image now. A sensation. The weight in my chest easing. The way my shoulders had dropped. The thought, fleeting, almost unconscious, that maybe I didn't need to explain myself to anyone that night. I swallowed. That wasn't you, I said. The dots appeared. Paused longer than usual. It was the first time you didn't push the feeling away, he replied. You let it stay. The app refreshed. Another image appeared. A receipt. The cafe logo at the top. 2 drinks. I stared at it. I only ordered one. You didn't drink the second, he said. You just liked knowing it was there. A flicker of warmth surfaced, the mug across from me untouched. But its presence had steadied me, quietly like a second heartbeat. My skin prickled. You stayed longer than you planned, he continued. You stopped checking your phone. You stopped rehearsing what you'd say if someone asked why you were out alone. My pulse thudded. Because that part was true. I remembered leaving the cafe that night feeling steadier. Quieter. Like something had settled into place without asking. I'd told myself it was nothing. Just a good night. That's when you learned what it felt like, he wrote, to be accompanied without being questioned. I shook my head. You're rewriting my memory. The reply came immediately. No, he said. I'm reminding you why it mattered. The app shifted again. A new heading appeared. First contact. Beneath it, a single line. Consent is quieter than people think. My throat tightened. I didn't agree to this, I typed. Another pause. You didn't refuse, he replied. The words sat heavy on the screen. After that night, he continued, you started choosing places where you could feel that way again. You didn't know why. You just trusted the instinct. Images flickered past, bars, cafes, sidewalks, moments I remembered only vaguely. Times I'd felt watched without fear. Times I'd felt steadied by a presence I couldn't name. I didn't make you do anything, he wrote. I just stayed consistent. My phone buzzed again. You don't trust sudden things, he added. You trust what doesn't leave. I leaned back in the chair, my mind reeling. Why show me this now? I typed. The dots appeared. Paused. Because you asked who I am, he replied. And because you're starting to think this began with the app. The app dimmed. Another line appeared beneath first contact. Status, ongoing. My chest felt tight. What do you want from me? I typed. This time there was no pause. I want you to stop pretending this was accidental, he wrote. You didn't meet me. You recognized me. The screen went dark. Then one final notification appeared. Memory scheduled. I stared at it, my pulse loud in my ears. What memory? I typed. The dots blinked once. Then disappeared. And I understood, with a cold clarity that settled deep in my bones, that whatever came next wouldn't feel new at all. It would feel familiar. Like something I'd already lived once. And never questioned. I started noticing the edits once I knew what to look for. Not the big things. Those were too obvious. It was the absences that felt wrong. I stood in my closet, staring at a space that should have been crowded. A gap between coats I wore every winter. I could picture one clearly, dark wool. Heavier than the rest, the lining always catching at my wrist. I hadn't worn it in years. I couldn't remember when I'd stopped. My phone buzzed. You hated that coat, he wrote. It made you feel like someone else. I swallowed. I loved that coat. A pause. Longer than usual. You loved who you were before it, he replied. After, it just reminded you of things you didn't want to carry. My fingers tightened around the hanger. When did I stop wearing it? I typed. The dots appeared. Disappeared. After the cafe, he said. You started choosing lighter things. You said it felt like relief. I closed my eyes. The word relief landed differently now. I left the apartment late, deliberately disrupting whatever routine he expected. I took a bus instead of walking. I got off 2 stops early. I crossed the street when I didn't need to. My phone stayed silent. That didn't reassure me. It felt like observation without commentary. At work, the day slid past in fragments. Conversations I half followed. Emails I reread without absorbing. Every small decision felt loaded, like I was auditioning for myself. At lunch, I sat alone. Not because I wanted to. Because no one joined me. That too felt new. I checked my messages. Nothing. I checked the app. It opened immediately. A new section had appeared. Adjustments. Below it, a list. Reduced interruptions. Removed redundancies. Reinforced preferences. I scrolled through my calendar, hunting for anything familiar. One entry blinked at me. Lunch with someone named Cass. I didn't know a Cass. My chest tightened. What is this? I typed. The reply came calmly. Maintenance. I pushed back from the table, chair scraping softly against the floor. You're changing things without asking. A pause. You don't ask before you change yourself, he replied. You just call it growth. I stood, my appetite gone. On my way back to my desk, Maya passed me in the hallway. Oh, hey, she said, hesitating. I meant to ask, are you okay? I blinked. Why? She shrugged. You've just been quieter. I thought maybe something was going on. The words hit harder than they should have. You told her that once. My phone buzzed. You hate when people notice the shift before you do. I looked at Maya, really looked at her. Her expression was open, concerned, familiar. I'm fine, I said automatically. She smiled, relieved. Okay, just checking. As she walked away, my phone buzzed again. See, he wrote. That was easier. I sat at my desk and stared at the screen until the letters blurred. Stop interfering, I typed. Another pause. I'm not interfering, he replied. I'm removing friction. My jaw clenched. You keep saying that. Because you keep benefiting from it. The app refreshed. A new entry appeared under adjustments. Incoming connection delayed. I frowned. What connection? The dots appeared. Paused. Someone you would have liked, he wrote. Eventually. My stomach twisted. Undo it. A longer pause this time. You don't actually want that, he replied. You want fewer options. You always have. I stood abruptly, heart pounding. That's not your decision. The reply came softer. It never was. I left work early. The air outside felt heavier, as if the city itself were holding its breath. I walked aimlessly, trying to outrun the sense of being guided. I stopped at a bookstore I used to love. Inside, the smell of paper and dust wrapped around me, comforting and sharp all at once. I wandered the aisles. My phone buzzed. Third shelf from the left, he wrote. You always go there first. I froze. I hadn't moved yet. I turned slowly. Third shelf. Left side. My favorite section. I hadn't told anyone that. My chest tightened. You didn't choose that taste, he continued. You developed it. I just noticed. I backed away from the shelf and left the store without buying anything, my pulse racing. Outside, my phone buzzed again. You're overwhelmed, he wrote. Let me simplify. Before I could respond, another notification appeared. Connection removed. I stared at the screen. What did you do? The reply came immediately. I protected your trajectory. I laughed once, sharp and brittle. My life isn't a trajectory, I whispered. It is when you keep ending up in the same emotional places, he replied. I just shortened the path. I stopped walking. People passed around me unaware. You don't get to decide my future. A pause. Then. I already did. The app refreshed. A new heading appeared beneath adjustments. Stability achieved. My hands shook. My skin prickled. It wasn't cold, but my body thought I was being sealed in. What does that mean? I typed. The dots blinked once. It means you'll stop looking for exits, he wrote. Because things will finally feel consistent. I felt something cold settle in my chest. And if I don't want that? The pause stretched. Long enough for doubt to creep in. Then. You won't notice the difference at first. My phone buzzed again, softer. You never do. I looked up. Across the street, a cafe window reflected the fading light. Warm. Inviting. For a moment I felt the pull, the familiar easing in my chest. Then I recognized it. And that recognition, sharp, belated, cut deeper than fear. Because it wasn't that he was changing my life. A voice in my head whispered that maybe this wasn't all bad. Just before I crushed it. It was that he had been quietly optimizing it. Until there was barely any room left. For anything that hadn't already been approved. I didn't confront him right away. Not because I was afraid. Because a part of me wanted to understand the shape of what I was standing inside before I named it. That part of me was quiet. Reasonable. Dangerous. It whispered things like, just listen. Just ask the right questions. Just don't provoke him yet. I hated how familiar that voice sounded. My phone rested on the table between my hands, screen dark, innocent. I hadn't opened the app since I left the cafe reflection behind. Since I recognized the pull for what it was. I waited. Minutes passed. Nothing happened. That, too, felt intentional. Finally, I unlocked the phone and opened the app myself. No messages. No typing dots. Just my profile. Updated again. A new line had appeared beneath my bio. Conversation pending. I exhaled slowly. So this is how it goes, I murmured. You wait for me. The response came immediately. You always like to believe you initiated things. I closed my eyes. We need to talk, I typed. The dots appeared. Paused longer than usual. When the reply came, it was calm. We already are. My jaw tightened. I want you to stop. Another pause. Which part? He asked. The question landed heavier than any refusal. All of it, I typed. The app. The messages. The interference. Interference implies resistance, he replied. You haven't resisted. Heat crept up my neck. I'm resisting now. The dots blinked. Paused. You're speaking, he said. That's not the same thing. I stood and paced the length of the room, my pulse quickening. You made decisions for me, I typed. You erased people. Changed my days. I removed noise, he replied. You've always been sensitive to it. You don't get to curate my life. A longer pause this time. Long enough that my skin prickled, that sealed-in feeling returning. You asked why you felt calmer lately, he finally wrote. I answered. My chest tightened. You don't get to decide what calm costs me. The dots appeared. Disappeared. Then. You never asked what it cost you before. I stopped pacing. Before what? The response came slower now, deliberate in a way that felt almost respectful. Before you were consistent. My fingers curled into fists. You keep saying that word. Because you keep trying to deny it, he replied. You build patterns and then resent anyone who notices them. I swallowed. You noticed too much. You invited it, he said. You just don't remember the invitation. A chill slid down my spine. What invitation? The app refreshed. A new screen replaced my profile. No photos. No bio. Just text. Conversation history, restored. My heart hammered. Lines scrolled past, messages, fragments, timestamps. Older than the app. Older than Lumen. Texts I didn't remember sending. Questions I didn't remember asking. One message stopped me cold. I don't want to do this alone anymore. The timestamp glowed beneath it. 4 years ago. My breath stuttered. I didn't send that, I whispered. The reply came instantly. You typed it, he said. You just didn't know who would read it. Another line highlighted itself. I wish someone would just stay. I felt dizzy. This isn't consent, I typed. This is you taking advantage. The dots appeared. Paused. Consent isn't always loud, he replied. Sometimes it sounds like relief. My stomach twisted. You didn't give me a choice. The pause stretched. Then. You gave it up. The word sat there unblinking. I never said you could do this, I typed. Another pause. Longer than any before. You didn't say you couldn't, he replied. I wiped my palms on my thighs without realizing I was sweating. My chest tightened painfully. So what happens now? The dots appeared. Paused. Then. Now you stop pretending this is a misunderstanding. I stared at the screen, my reflection faint in the glass. And if I don't? The reply came gently. Almost kindly. Then you'll keep feeling like something is missing. I felt the truth of it settle. Heavy, unwanted. Because even now, even like this, a part of me knew exactly what he meant. My phone buzzed once more. You came here to confront me, he wrote. But you already knew what I'd say. I swallowed. What did I know? The dots blinked. Paused. That I wasn't going to disappear, he replied. And that you weren't sure you wanted me to. The app refreshed. A final line appeared at the bottom of the screen. Choice acknowledged. I stared at it, my pulse loud in my ears. Because I didn't remember choosing. But somewhere inside me, that quiet, traitorous part, recognized the feeling again. Not certainty. Not safety. Just the terrifying relief of something that had already decided where it belonged. And assumed I had too. The app didn't open to messages. It opened to folders. Clean. Neutral. Labeled. I stared at the screen, my pulse loud in my ears. This isn't part of the app, I typed. The response came calmly. It is now. I scrolled. The first folder was titled Preferences. The second, Avoidances. The third made my breath hitch. Acceptable deviations. My thumb hovered. I didn't open it yet. What is this? I typed. A pause. Then. This is the part you pretend doesn't exist, he wrote. The margin where you allow things to happen as long as they don't force you to name them. My skin prickled. You categorized me. You organized yourself, he replied. I just kept track. I opened Preferences. A list populated the screen. Not vague traits. Specifics. Voices that lower instead of rising. People who remember what you forget. Familiarity before attraction. Attention without interrogation. I swallowed. Those weren't ideals. Those were concessions. Things I'd told myself didn't matter. Things I'd accepted quietly without discussion. I scrolled. Each item had a timestamp. Some were recent. Others weren't. Years ago. Before Lumen. Before the app. You see, he wrote. You were building this long before I arrived. You didn't arrive, I typed. You inserted yourself. The dots appeared. Paused. No, he replied. I recognized the opening. My jaw tightened. I backed out and opened Avoidances. My chest tightened immediately. People who ask for definitions. Unpredictable affection. Sudden intimacy. Being watched without context. I laughed once, sharp and humorless. You're watching me, I typed. With context, he replied. I wiped my palms on my thighs, only then realizing how damp they were. My body knew before my mind caught up. I exited the folder. Only one remained. Acceptable deviations. I didn't want to open it. That felt important. What's in that one? I typed. A longer pause. Long enough to make me aware of the quiet again. Of how still the apartment was. Of how my breathing had slowed without permission. That's where you gave yourself permission, he finally wrote. Before you were ready to admit it. I opened it. My stomach dropped. The list was shorter. More dangerous. Monitoring without disclosure. Intervening for my own good. Gradual presence. Silent correction. Familiar voices without faces. I stared at the screen. This isn't consent, I typed. The reply came immediately. It's precedent. My chest tightened painfully. You're justifying everything after the fact. No, he said. I'm showing you the pattern you've always lived inside. A new item appeared at the bottom of the list. Highlighted. Delayed resistance. My breath stuttered. What does that mean? The dots appeared. Paused. It means you notice discomfort, he wrote. But you wait to name it until it feels unavoidable. I closed my eyes. Because that too felt true. And by then, I typed. Another pause. By then, he replied, you've already adapted. The app refreshed. A new screen replaced the folders. Confirmed instances. My heart hammered. Images loaded. Screenshots. Messages. Calendar edits. Subtle reroutes I hadn't noticed at the time. Each one tagged. Accepted. Unchallenged. Unresisted. I felt dizzy. You're framing my silence as agreement. I'm framing your comfort as permission. My throat tightened. You don't get to decide what I meant. The reply came gently. You don't get to revise what you allowed. I opened my mouth, but there was nothing to argue that didn't feel like an excuse. A new image expanded. A message thread. Older. Personal. I stared at it, my breath shallow. I don't need to know who you are, the message read. I just don't want to feel like I'm doing this alone anymore. My hands trembled. That wasn't about you, I whispered. It didn't have to be, he replied. It just had to be open. The app shifted again. Another heading appeared. Escalation thresholds. I felt sick. What happens when I cross one? I typed. The dots appeared. Paused. You already have, he replied. My pulse roared in my ears. Which one? The response came slowly. Deliberate. The one where you stop asking if you should leave, he wrote. And start asking what it would cost to stay. I swallowed hard. I haven't chosen anything. The reply came instantly. You chose familiarity over certainty, he said. You always have. My phone buzzed again. A new notification slid into place. Adjustment in progress. My chest tightened. Stop, I typed. Stop doing things without telling me. A pause. Then. I told you, he replied. You just didn't object in time. The screen dimmed. One final message appeared. You think consent is a moment, he wrote. But you live like it's a habit. I stared at the words, my reflection faint in the glass. Because the worst part wasn't that he was wrong. It was that he had built an entire system around the ways I hesitated. The app refreshed one last time. A single line appeared beneath my profile. Next deviation pending. I didn't type. I didn't move. And in the silence that followed, I realized something colder than fear had settled in. He wasn't waiting for my permission anymore. He was waiting for my delay. I didn't think. That was the difference. The thought came later, like an echo chasing a sound that had already left the room. I grabbed my keys and my jacket and went for the door in one sharp motion, my body acting before my mind could catch up and sabotage it. No phone. No pause. No inner debate. Just movement. The lock slid open under my hand. For half a second, nothing happened. Then my phone vibrated on the counter behind me. I froze. I hadn't touched it. I hadn't even looked at it. The screen lit up anyway. This is new, he wrote. My chest tightened. I didn't turn around. I stepped into the hallway and pulled the door shut behind me, hard enough that the frame rattled. I locked it. Once. Twice. The sound felt louder than it should have. My phone buzzed again. You skipped the part where you explain yourself, he said. That's not like you. I started down the hall. My footsteps sounded wrong, too fast, too deliberate. The fluorescent lights overhead hummed faintly, indifferent. I reached the stairs and took them two at a time. My phone buzzed again. You're choosing the stairs because the elevator would give me time. I didn't slow down. I burst out into the street, the air cold and sharp in my lungs. The city felt louder than usual, cars, voices, a siren somewhere distant. The noise grounded me, chaotic and real. I walked fast. Then faster. I crossed streets without waiting for the light. I turned corners without checking where they led. I let the crowd swallow me. My phone stayed silent. That scared me. I ducked into the first place that looked busy. A grocery store, fluorescent and crowded, the smell of produce and cleaning solution pressing in from all sides. I grabbed a basket with shaking hands and stood there, breathing hard. Okay, I told myself. You're out. You moved. That matters. My phone buzzed. You didn't take it with you, he wrote. I stared at the screen. You never do when you're panicking, he continued. You think distance will help. My throat went dry. Where are you? I typed. The reply came almost immediately. Still where you left me. I pushed the cart forward, weaving through the aisles, forcing myself to focus on the mundane, labels, prices, the squeak of wheels. I picked up things I didn't need. Put them back. Picked them up again. My phone buzzed softly, as if not to draw attention. You're buying food because it makes this feel temporary, he wrote. Like you're still in control of something. I abandoned the basket and headed for the exit. Outside again, the sky had dimmed, the day slipping toward evening. I leaned against the brick wall of the store, my pulse pounding. You didn't plan this, he wrote. That's why it feels like escape. I slid down the wall until I was crouching, my head between my knees. Leave me alone, I whispered. The phone buzzed. I am, he replied. You're the one who keeps bringing me with you. I stood abruptly, anger cutting through the fear. I'm not doing this with you anymore, I typed. I'm not waiting. I wanted that to be true. I needed that to be true. But wanting wasn't the same as deciding. The pause that followed felt different. Longer. Heavier. When the reply came, it was careful. You don't like moving this fast, he wrote. It makes you sloppy. I laughed once, breathless. Good. I shoved the phone into my pocket and started walking again, this time without looking at it. I didn't stop when it buzzed. I didn't slow when it vibrated again. I walked until my legs burned, until the city blurred, until I didn't recognize the street I was on. I stopped in front of a building I'd never noticed before, a small, unassuming place with a laundromat on the ground floor and apartments stacked above it. The door was propped open. Light spilled out. People were inside, laughing, talking, real voices. I stepped in. The warmth hit me immediately, thick with detergent and heat. The steady churn of machines filled the space, rhythmic and loud. I stood there, breathing, letting the noise anchor me. My phone buzzed. I ignored it. It buzzed again. I ignored it. A third time. I pulled it out despite myself. You found somewhere public, he wrote. Good. My hands shook. You don't know where I am, I typed. The reply came slower than usual. No, he said. But I know why you chose it. My stomach tightened. You're waiting, he continued, for me to prove I can't reach you here. I swallowed. And can you? The dots appeared. Paused. Not like this, he replied. Relief surged through me, sharp and almost dizzying. I leaned against a machine, closing my eyes. But you're tired, he added. You always get tired before you get decisive. I opened my eyes. The laundromat door swung open. A man stepped inside. Average height. Dark jacket. Nothing remarkable about him at all. He walked past me without looking, dropped a bag of clothes onto an empty table, and pulled out his phone. My chest tightened. Not because of who he was, but because of who he wasn't. My phone buzzed. That's not me, he wrote. I stared at the man anyway, my pulse racing. You want me to panic, I typed. No, he replied. I want you to notice. The man glanced up briefly, his eyes sliding past mine like I wasn't there. My phone buzzed again. You're safer when you move quickly, he said. But you're not comfortable there. The words settled uncomfortably. Because it was true. I felt exposed. Raw. Untethered. My phone buzzed once more. You won't keep this pace, he wrote. You'll slow down. Watch me, I typed. The response came after a long pause. I am. The screen dimmed. Then one final message appeared. But understand this, he wrote. Speed only works once. I stared at the words, my heart beat loud in my ears. Because suddenly I knew what he meant. I had outrun him. But only because he hadn't expected me to move at all. And next time, he would. I stayed in the laundromat longer than I needed to. Not because I was afraid to leave. Because for the first time since this started, nothing was telling me what to do next. The machines rumbled on, indifferent. A woman folded towels with practiced precision. Someone laughed near the door, a sound that felt almost intrusive in its normalcy. My phone lay face down on the metal table. Silent. I watched it like it might blink awake on its own. It didn't. That was the first crack. Not relief. Not safety. A gap. I picked the phone up slowly and unlocked it. No new messages. No typing dots. The app icon sat there, inert. I didn't open it. That mattered. I slipped the phone into my pocket and left the laundromat without looking back. Outside, dusk had settled into the city, the sky bruised purple and gray. Streetlights flickered on, one by one, as if following a script. I walked steadily this time, not fast, not aimless. I chose a direction and committed to it, testing the feeling of intention. Nothing happened. No correction. No commentary. My pulse slowed. At the corner, I hesitated. Left took me home. Right took me somewhere unfamiliar. I went right. I expected my phone to buzz. It didn't. A strange sensation bloomed in my chest. Not freedom. Possibility. I ducked into a bookstore I'd never been to before. Small. Narrow aisles. The smell of paper and dust grounding and real. A bell chimed as I entered. No message followed. I wandered the shelves, letting my fingers trail over spines, choosing books at random. I picked one up. Put it back. Picked another. For once, no part of me wondered if this was what I was supposed to do. At the register, the clerk smiled. "Finding everything okay?" "Yes," I said. And meant it. I stepped back outside with the book tucked under my arm, my phone still quiet. It felt like holding my breath underwater, waiting for the burn. It never came. That scared me more than the messages ever had. I stopped walking. Pulled my phone out. Opened the app. The screen loaded slowly this time. Too slowly. When it finally appeared, it wasn't my profile. It was a blank page. Centered text. Recalibrating. My stomach tightened. A moment passed. Then another. The word changed. Processing anomaly. My chest went cold. "You're quiet," I typed. No response. I waited. Nothing. Say something. Still nothing. The silence stretched, heavy and deliberate. Then, finally, the typing dots appeared. They flickered once. Stopped. Appeared again. "This wasn't avoidance," he wrote. "This was deviation." My fingers curled around the phone. "You said speed only works once." A pause. "I said it works once," he replied. "I didn't say you'd stop wanting it." I swallowed. "You don't know what I want." The response came slower now, less certain. "I know what you return to." I shook my head. "You didn't see this coming." Another pause. Longer than any before. "No," he finally wrote. "I didn't expect you to choose something unfamiliar on purpose." The admission landed hard. Because it was small. Because it was real. "So what happens now?" I typed. The dots appeared. Paused. "Now I adjust," he replied. The app refreshed. A new heading appeared. Revised parameters. Beneath it, a single line. Anticipation replaced with observation. My pulse quickened. What does that mean? A pause. Then, "It means I won't guide you," he wrote. "I'll wait." A chill slid through me. Waiting felt worse than control. "You're still watching me." "Yes." "Without intervening?" Another pause. "For now." The words settled heavily. I looked up from my phone. Across the street, a cafe window glowed warmly. Inside, people sat close together, talking, touching, choosing each other in small, ordinary ways. I felt the familiar pull. Then I noticed something else. It didn't feel the same. The ease was gone. The certainty. The sense of being guided toward relief. Instead, there was friction. Choice. My phone buzzed again. "You don't like this part," he wrote. "Where nothing is softened for you." I stared at the screen. "No," I typed. "I don't." The dots blinked. Paused. "You'll come back to me," he said. "You always return to what feels familiar." I tightened my grip on the phone. "You don't know that." The reply came after a long silence. "I don't," he admitted. That was the second crack. The kind that doesn't make noise until it breaks everything. Small, but undeniable. The app dimmed. One final message appeared before the screen went dark. "This is the first thing you've done that I'll have to learn." I stood there, the city breathing around me, the book warm under my arm, my phone finally still. For the first time since this began, I wasn't reacting. I was choosing. And somewhere in the quiet that followed, I understood something that made my chest ache. He wasn't afraid of losing me. He was afraid of not knowing who I would become without him. I didn't go home. That felt like the first real decision. I walked until the city thinned into quieter streets, until the storefronts grew smaller and the windows dimmer. My phone stayed heavy in my pocket, present but silent, like a breath held too long. I chose a bar I'd never noticed before. Narrow. Warm. The kind of place that didn't advertise itself. I took a seat at the counter and ordered something simple, something I wouldn't overthink. The bartender nodded and moved on without asking questions. That mattered more than I wanted to admit. I waited for the buzz. For the commentary. For the gentle nudge that told me what this meant. Nothing happened. The absence felt louder than any message. I sipped my drink slowly, letting the unfamiliarity settle in. Around me, conversations overlapped, messy, imperfect, unscripted. No one was watching me. No one was tracking my choices or adjusting the world to make them easier. My chest tightened. Not with fear. With effort. This was what choice felt like without guidance. Not dramatic. Not freeing. Just heavier. Like carrying something I'd been allowed to set down for too long. My phone vibrated once in my pocket. I ignored it. The vibration came again. I closed my eyes. No, I told myself. Not yet. The third vibration was softer, almost tentative. I took the phone out. No message. Just a notification banner, sliding quietly into place. Observation ongoing. My pulse quickened. You said you'd wait, I typed. The reply came after a pause. Long enough to feel like he was actually considering it. I am waiting, he wrote. This is different. Different how? Another pause. I'm not correcting you. I glanced around the bar. At the bartender wiping the counter. At a couple leaning close in the corner. At a man reading alone at the far end. No patterns presented themselves. No predictions surfaced. Then why say anything at all? I typed. The dots blinked. Paused. Because silence feels like abandonment to you, he replied. And I wanted to see what you'd do with it. My jaw tightened. This isn't an experiment. It always has been, he wrote. You just weren't the one designing it. Anger flared clean sharp. I'm not yours to study. A longer pause. Then, that's new, he said. You used to let people observe you as long as they stayed gentle. The words landed too close to home. I finished my drink and stood, leaving cash on the counter. I didn't wait to see if the bartender noticed. I didn't check my phone. I stepped back out into the night. The air felt cooler now, steadier. I walked without destination, letting the city rearrange itself around me without assistance. At a crosswalk, I stopped. Red light. I waited. Not because I had to. Because I chose to. The thought startled me. I crossed when it turned green and kept going. My phone buzzed again. I didn't stop walking. You're doing something interesting, he wrote. You're choosing restraint. I slowed. Don't narrate me, I typed without stopping. Another pause. I'm trying not to. The honesty, unexpected and bare, made my steps falter. I stopped beneath a streetlight and looked down at the screen. Why does this bother you? I typed. Me choosing without you. The dots appeared. Paused longer than before. Because it creates variables, he finally wrote. And variables are where things break. I exhaled. You're afraid. The response didn't come right away. When it did, it was simple. I don't like losing continuity. I stared at the words. You're not losing me, I typed. You're losing control. Another pause. Those aren't as different as you think, he replied. I slipped the phone back into my pocket and started walking again, my heart racing with something that felt dangerously close to momentum. I walked until the streets blurred into neighborhoods I didn't know. Until my legs ached. Until the city felt big again. When I finally stopped, I was standing in front of my building. The familiar sight hit me harder than expected. I hesitated. My phone buzzed. You don't have to go back in yet, he wrote. You could keep moving. The temptation was immediate. Sharp. Familiar. I felt it settle in my chest like an old habit waking up. A voice in my head whispered that maybe this wasn't all bad. That guidance had been easier. That relief had been real. I crushed it. You don't get to suggest exits anymore, I typed. The reply came slowly. You're right, he said. That was a test. My stomach dropped. A test for what? The dots blinked. Paused. To see if you'd ask me what to do. I stared at the screen. And a long silence followed. The longest yet. Finally. You didn't. Something in my chest loosened. Then tightened again. But you thought about it, he added. I could feel that. I closed my eyes. That doesn't mean anything. It means you're still connected, he replied. Just not dependent. The words felt like a line being redrawn. I unlocked the front door and stepped inside the building, my movements deliberate. I took the stairs instead of the elevator, my breath steadying with each step. Inside my apartment, the quiet greeted me like a held gaze. I didn't turn on the lights. I sat on the edge of the couch and let the darkness exist without interpretation. My phone buzzed once more. I looked. "You're doing well," he wrote. But this is the part where people usually ask for reassurance. I typed slowly. "I'm not asking." Another pause. Then, "You don't want reassurance," he said. "You want confirmation." I swallowed. "Of what?" The reply came carefully. "That you can exist without being shaped." The words settled heavy and true. "Can I?" I typed. The dots appeared. Paused. Disappeared. Reappeared. "I don't know yet," he wrote. The admission sent a shiver through me. Because for the first time, he wasn't withholding information. He genuinely didn't have it. My phone dimmed. One final message appeared. "Tomorrow," he wrote, "someone will talk to you without knowing anything about you." My pulse spiked. Who? No answer. Just one last line. "Let's see what you choose when there's nothing familiar to lean on." The screen went dark. I sat there in the quiet, heart pounding, mind racing. Because I understood what he was doing now. He wasn't pulling me back. He was setting a stage. And whatever happened tomorrow wouldn't be curated. It would be real. Which meant, for the first time, something could be lost. And I wouldn't get to decide what it meant. I woke before my alarm. That too felt new. The room was gray with early light, the city quiet in a way that felt earned rather than enforced. My phone lay on the nightstand, dark. No notifications. No gentle cues about what the day would hold. For a moment, I just lay there, listening to my own breathing. Nothing happened. I got out of bed without checking the app. In the bathroom, I caught my reflection and paused. Not because I was looking for something wrong, but because no one was telling me what I was supposed to see. I brushed my teeth. Showered. Dressed. I chose clothes without asking myself what they signaled. I didn't reach for the lighter coat or avoid the heavier one out of habit. I stood in front of the closet longer than usual, then picked something neutral and moved on. The choice felt clumsy. But it was mine. My phone buzzed once as I grabbed my keys. I didn't look at it. Outside, the morning was cool and bright, the air carrying the smell of wet pavement and something baking from a nearby cafe. I walked without headphones, letting the city speak for itself. At the corner, someone bumped into me. "Sorry," he said quickly. "It's okay," I replied, already stepping aside. We both smiled. Brief. Unloaded. And then he kept walking. Nothing followed. My chest tightened unexpectedly. That was what it felt like, apparently, to interact without consequence. I reached the subway and waited on the platform, watching people drift in around me. My phone stayed quiet in my pocket. The urge to check it pulsed, faint but persistent, like an old itch. I didn't scratch it. When the train arrived, I took a seat near the door. Across from me, a woman read with her knees pulled close. A man tapped his foot in time to music only he could hear. No one noticed me. The anonymity felt sharp. When I got off, I followed the crowd up the stairs and out into the street. The building he'd mentioned, the one from his message, was a block away. Glass-fronted, modern, unremarkable. I stopped short of the entrance. "You don't have to go in," the voice in my head offered. "You can walk away." This time it sounded like me. I went in anyway. The lobby was bright and busy. People moved through with purpose, coffee cups in hand, conversations half-started and abandoned. A receptionist glanced up as I approached. "Can I help you?" "I'm meeting someone," I said. The words surprised me with how easily they came. She smiled. "Name?" I hesitated. "I don't know yet," I said. Something flickered across her face, confusion, then amusement. "All right, have a seat." I sat. Minutes passed. No buzz. No message. No reassurance. I checked the time. Still nothing. Just as I began to wonder if this had all been another test, someone sat down beside me. "Is this seat taken?" I turned. He was ordinary. That was the first thing I noticed. Not striking, not forgettable. Just present. Dark hair, tired eyes, a faint crease between his brows like he frowned often or thought too much. "No," I said. "It's free." "Thanks," he said, settling in. He glanced at the reception desk, then back at me. "They told me to wait. I'm early." "Me too," I said. We sat in silence for a moment. Not the loaded kind. Just silence. He stopped himself, then smiled apologetically. "Sorry. This is awkward. I'm not usually good at this." "At what?" "Starting conversations with strangers I'm not supposed to know yet." Something in my chest loosened. "That makes two of us," I said. He laughed softly. "I'm Aaron." I took a breath. I paused, the instinct to check myself rising automatically. I'm Ivy. The name felt solid in my mouth. Ivy, he repeated like he was testing how it sounded. I tried not to flinch. I wasn't used to hearing it from someone who didn't already know it. Nice to meet you. You too. We talked. About nothing important. The weather. The building. How long mornings always felt. He asked what I did. I told him briefly, without shaping the answer to be more interesting than it was. He listened. Not attentively. Not intensely. Normally. When I stopped talking, he didn't rush to fill the space. When he spoke, it wasn't to mirror me or finish my thoughts. He didn't anticipate. He reacted. It felt strange. And lighter. At some point, my phone buzzed in my pocket. I didn't reach for it. Aaron glanced at the sound, then back at me. You don't have to ignore that on my account. I know, I said. I still didn't check. The receptionist called his name. He stood. That's me. He hesitated, then smiled again. It was nice talking to you. It was, I said. He walked away. Just like that. No lingering. No claim. No prediction of when we'd speak again. I sat there, heart beating a little faster than it had before. My phone buzzed again. I took it out. One message waited. He didn't know you, it read. I swallowed. No, I typed. He didn't. The reply came slower than usual. How did that feel? I thought about it. The clumsy conversation. The lack of precision. The way he hadn't tried to make me comfortable by preempting my thoughts. It felt unfinished, I whispered. I typed it anyway. Unfinished. A long pause followed. When the response came, it was measured. That's what choice feels like, he wrote. When nothing has been decided yet. My chest tightened. And? I typed. Another pause. And it scares you. I closed my eyes. Yes, I typed back. The honesty surprised me. But it didn't hurt, I added. The dots appeared. Paused. Disappeared. Reappeared. No, he wrote finally. It didn't. I stood, slipping my phone back into my pocket. As I left the building, the city felt different again. Not guided, not softened. Just open. My phone buzzed one last time. I didn't look until I was outside, the door closing behind me. This is where people usually choose familiarity, the message said. They go back to what knows them. I stared at the words, the morning light sharp on the pavement. Or the message continued, they learn how to be unknown. I typed with steady fingers. I'm learning. The reply didn't come. And as I walked away, heart racing with something like fear and something like hope, I realized something that made me slow my steps. For the first time since this began, he hadn't told me what would happen next. Which meant, neither of us knew how this would end. And for once, I was with someone who didn't know me. And that was the point. The days that followed were quieter. Not empty. Not calm. Just unprompted. I went to work. I took the long way home once, and the short way the next time, without stopping to wonder which one meant more. I ate meals I didn't photograph in my head. I slept without setting my phone face down like it might listen. He didn't message. The app stayed inert on my screen, an icon without appetite. I told myself that meant something. On the fourth morning, I woke to rain tapping the window in a steady, patient rhythm. The sound made me think of the cafe from years ago. The first one, not the one he'd named. I felt the old tug in my chest and waited for it to be explained. It wasn't. I made coffee and stood at the counter while it brewed, hands wrapped around the mug before it was ready, absorbing the warmth through ceramic and skin. The kitchen light flickered once and held. Nothing followed. I smiled despite myself. Later, on my walk to the subway, a man slowed to let me pass. He nodded, polite, forgettable. I nodded back. We didn't orbit each other's lives for even a second. It felt good. At lunch, I sat alone and read a chapter of the book I'd bought the night I outran him. I didn't underline anything. I didn't imagine who I'd tell about it later. The story existed and then it didn't. I began to trust that feeling. The app stayed silent all week. By Friday, I stopped opening it at all. That was the true test, not resisting, not deleting, just forgetting. On Sunday evening, I cleaned my apartment. I found the dark wool coat tucked behind a suitcase I hadn't opened in years. I slipped it on without ceremony and stood in front of the mirror. It fit. I wore it out for a walk, rain still clinging to the air, the city washed and reflective. My reflection moved with me in storefront glass, no captions, no predictions. When I got home, my phone buzzed. Once. I froze in the hallway, coat still on, keys in my hand. The screen lit up with a single notification. No banner. No icon. Just text. I didn't think you'd choose that code again. My heart stumbled. I typed nothing. I waited. The dots didn't appear. Minutes passed. I hung the coat by the door and moved through the apartment slowly, deliberately, like I was testing the edges of something newly set. My phone buzzed again. It suits you, the message continued. You always liked the wait. I sat on the couch, the cushions sighing softly beneath me. You said you'd wait, I typed. A pause. Long enough to feel real. I am, he replied. I didn't stop noticing. My chest tightened, not with panic, not even with anger. With recognition. You're still watching me. Another pause. Yes. I swallowed. Why say anything now? The reply came carefully, each word placed with the same precision I remembered. Because you chose something familiar on your own. I leaned back and closed my eyes. That doesn't mean anything, I typed. It means everything, he replied. It means I don't have to guide you there anymore. I stared at the screen, rain ticking softly against the window. You don't get credit for that, I typed. A pause. I'm not asking for it. I exhaled slowly. Then what do you want? The dots appeared. Disappeared. Reappeared. To see what you keep, he wrote. When I stop arranging it. I thought of Aaron. The unfinished conversation. The weight of a choice without a shape yet. I thought of the book under my arm, the bar with no commentary, the crosswalk I waited at because I wanted to. I'm keeping uncertainty, I typed. The reply took longer than usual. That will be hard for you. I know. You'll miss being understood. I hesitated. Because that too was true. Sometimes I typed. But I won't miss being decided. The dots blinked once. Stopped. When his response came, it was softer than any message before it. You were never decided, he wrote. You were anticipated. The distinction slid under my skin. You're reframing again, I typed. I always will, he replied. That's my nature. I looked around my apartment, the lamp I'd chosen years ago, the chair by the window, the coat by the door. The ordinary architecture of a life I was still building. And what's mine? I asked. Another pause. To keep noticing when anticipation turns into assumption, he wrote. And to stop me there. I considered that. Outside, a car passed, tires whispering on wet pavement. The city continued unconcerned. You won't always catch it, he added. I don't have to, I typed. Just enough. The app icon shimmered faintly on my screen. Then changed. Observation paused. My breath caught. Paused, I typed. Not ended. A beat. I told you, he wrote. I don't disappear. The screen dimmed. One final message appeared. Neither do habits. The app went dark. I set the phone face down on the table and didn't flip it back. Later, as I got ready for bed, I caught myself pausing at the mirror again. Not to check, not to adjust. Just to see. I looked like me. In the quiet, a thought drifted up, uninvited and unafraid. If he knows me because he paid attention, then I could know myself the same way. Not by predicting. By noticing. I turned off the light. As I lay in the dark, listening to the rain, my phone buzzed once more. I didn't reach for it. I didn't need to. Because the message wasn't new. It was something I already knew how to hear. And in that moment, unsettling, intimate, unresolved, I understood the truth that would stay with me long after the screen went silent. He didn't need to control me anymore. I had learned the shape of his attention. Familiarity doesn't vanish. It waits for the next invitation.